In a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio, there lived a 12-year-old girl named Emily Thompson. From the outside, her life appeared to be like that of any other young girl her age. She lived in a charming, well-kept home with her parents, Rachel and David Thompson, and her younger brother, Jack. She went to school like every other preteen, had a group of friends, and spent time doing the usual activities, playing sports, reading books, and occasionally hanging out with friends at the mall. But what most people didn't know was that behind the scenes, Emily harbored a secret ambition that would ultimately change the course of her life and lead her down a path of tragic consequences. Emily was not just another girl navigating her childhood, she was a budding YouTuber. For years, she had been obsessed with the idea of creating content online, posting videos that allowed her to express herself and share her thoughts with the world. At first, it was a hobby. She started with basic vlogs, videos about her daily life, some gaming content, and even beauty tutorials. It was all innocent at first, just another way for her to engage with her friends and the online world. But as time went on, her desire for recognition began to evolve into something more consuming. Her YouTube channel, initially a small space for Emily to explore her creativity, slowly began to gain traction. At first, the views were modest, but as she posted more frequently and engaged with her followers, her subscriber count began to grow steadily. Emily felt a rush of excitement every time she saw a new comment or a new like on her videos. It wasn't just about sharing her life anymore. It was about becoming someone important. She would check her analytics obsessively, eagerly watching the numbers climb higher. The thought of becoming popular, of being seen by thousands, even millions of people, consumed her thoughts. Her videos started to take on a more distinct focus. Instead of simply sharing everyday experiences, she began to craft content with a more dramatic edge. She filmed more extreme challenges, over-the-top reactions, and tried to make her life appear more exciting and vibrant than it actually was. At the same time, she began experimenting with edgy content, pushing boundaries in order to gain the attention she craved. She was no longer just Emily. She was Emily Thompson, the YouTube sensation. Every post felt like another step closer to achieving the fame she dreamed of. However, as Emily's online following grew, so did the pressure. The initial thrill of gaining views and subscribers began to wane, and the constant need to keep up with her own success started to eat away at her. Emily became obsessed with making sure her videos were getting noticed. The idea of viral content consumed her. She would study trending videos, analyzing what types of posts gained the most traction, what people were reacting to, what challenges were in at the moment. She meticulously curated her content to appeal to the broadest audience possible, focusing more on the potential for views than on the integrity or authenticity of the material. Emily began to realize that in the world of YouTube, the more dramatic the content, the more likely it was to get noticed. The more shocking, the more extreme, the more controversial, the better. In her mind, it was simple. Views equaled fame, fame equaled success, and success meant everything she ever wanted. The line between what was real and what was fabricated began to blur for her. The more she immersed herself in the online world, the harder it became to distinguish between the life she was living and the persona she was creating. What had started as an innocent way to pass the time had morphed into an obsession. A need to get more views, more likes, and more subscribers. Her parents, Rachel and David, had always been supportive of Emily's interest in YouTube. They saw it as a creative outlet, something that allowed their daughter to express herself and engage with others in a positive way. They never fully understood the allure of social media and the world of influencers, but they trusted Emily and believed in her talent. However, they did not realize how deep her obsession with her online presence had gone. They noticed how much time she spent on her phone, how she would become withdrawn when she was filming or editing her videos, but they attributed it to the usual growing pains of adolescence. They never imagined that their daughter's desire for success would lead her down such a dangerous path. As Emily spent more time online, the pressure to maintain her growing presence started to take a toll on her mental and emotional well-being. She became fixated on what other influencers were doing, constantly comparing herself to them and wondering what she was doing wrong. If her videos weren't getting as many views as she hoped, or if a post didn't go viral, she would feel a pang of anxiety. She started to feel like a failure, even when the numbers seemed to suggest otherwise. In her mind, nothing was ever enough. There was always the next step, the next video, the next big thing to chase. Her parents, noticing the changes in her behavior, grew concerned. They tried to talk to her about how much time she was spending online, how she seemed more distant, how she seemed consumed by her need for fame. They encouraged her to focus on school, to spend time with friends outside of YouTube, but Emily brushed them off. She told them she was doing fine and that everything was under control. But deep down, Emily knew it wasn't. She was slipping further into the mindset that her entire worth was based on the number of views and followers she had. The drive for validation from a screen had begun to overshadow everything else in her life, and the consequences of this obsession were becoming more apparent every day. The more Emily tried to please her audience, the further she pushed her boundaries. She became willing to take risks, to do anything that would make her stand out from the sea of other creators. In her mind, it was all for the greater good of her channel, of her dream. But she didn't realize that the obsession was changing her, turning her into someone she didn't even recognize. The girl who had once been full of energy and hope now seemed driven only by a need to be seen, to be admired, to be acknowledged. And as the lines between her real self and her online persona blurred, Emily found herself caught in a cycle of destruction, unable to stop her insatiable thirst for fame. The pressure to continue creating viral content, to keep her channel growing at any cost, had begun to consume her every waking moment. But Emily couldn't see that the very thing she thought would make her happy, the fame, the attention, the recognition, was slowly stripping away everything that truly mattered. What had begun as a creative outlet was now a toxic obsession, one that threatened to unravel not only her relationship with her family but her own sense of self. As Emily's YouTube channel continued to grow, so did her hunger for more. The once simple joy of sharing her life with an ever-increasing audience had transformed into an obsession with views, likes, and subscribers. Each new milestone was gratifying, but with every achievement came a deeper yearning for the next one. It wasn't enough to simply upload videos about her day-to-day activities or to share her opinions on the latest trends. She needed something more. She needed to be bold, to be noticed, to stand out in a saturated world of content creators. Emily knew that the online space was crowded, filled with creators vying for attention just as she was. She had to do something bigger, something more shocking to ensure she wouldn't get lost in the noise. Emily started to experiment with more extreme challenges. The safe, lighthearted vlogs about her life were no longer enough. She began pushing boundaries, testing the limits of what could be considered acceptable content in the world of YouTube. The challenges became increasingly daring, from dangerous stunts to emotionally charged videos that often blurred the line between genuine feelings and fabricated drama. Emily began filming her emotions in a raw, unfiltered way, putting herself in situations that not only tested her limits, but also shocked her audience. She filmed her frustrations, her triumphs, her tears, and her moments of vulnerability, all for the purpose of keeping her viewers engaged. She knew that the more intense and personal the content, the more likely it was to attract attention. But despite the growing number of views, something inside Emily was still dissatisfied. She felt as though she was being overshadowed by other content creators who had found their own viral moments and built their own followings. The pressure to keep up with these creators, to maintain her place in the spotlight, began to weigh heavily on her. She couldn't help but compare herself to others who were making waves with even more shocking or extreme content. It was as if no matter how hard she worked, it wasn't enough to secure the attention she craved. Each view, each like, felt like a fleeting moment of validation, temporary satisfaction in an ongoing race that only seemed to get harder. That feeling of being in competition with others, of constantly measuring herself against the most successful influencers, was maddening. Emily needed more. She couldn't let herself be one of many. She had to be the one who stood out. The idea of simply creating content that entertained or inspired no longer appealed to her. The buzz of gaining attention, the thrill of seeing her videos go viral, was addictive, and she was willing to go to any lengths to feed that addiction. The more she scrolled through her social media feeds, the more she felt the pull of fame. She saw the YouTubers who had made names for themselves with dramatic, controversial events, stunts that had put them at the forefront of the viral scene, and as she watched them gain success, her own dissatisfaction grew. It wasn't long before her desire for fame led her down a darker path. One evening, while scrolling through videos of viral sensations and reading about other creators who had gained massive followings through shocking, sometimes reckless acts, Emily's mind began to take a twisted turn. What if she could be one of those creators? What if she could orchestrate the ultimate viral sensation, something so shocking and dramatic that it would blow up her channel and make her an internet legend? What if she could create an event so extreme that it would captivate the entire online world, drawing millions of views and making her a household name? Emily's thoughts began to spiral as she imagined the possibilities. She had seen how certain YouTubers had gained notoriety by pushing the envelope, some by staging pranks, others by doing dangerous stunts that threatened their own well-being, and still others who used emotional manipulation to create a following. It wasn't just about making content anymore. It was about making a statement, about doing something that no one else had the nerve to do. Emily became fixated on the idea that if she could create an event that combined the intensity of a shocking stunt with the emotional drama of a personal journey, she would become untouchable. It would be a viral sensation like no other. She would be talked about across the internet, in social media circles, and in the mainstream media. She would finally have the fame she had been chasing for so long. As the idea began to take root in her mind, Emily's obsession with fame turned into something darker. The line between what was acceptable and what was not began to blur. She no longer cared about the consequences of her actions. She only cared about the outcome. In her mind, the end justified the means. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that this was the only way to truly make a name for herself. The thought of doing something extreme, something that would guarantee her a massive following, consumed her. It was no longer enough to simply make videos that entertained or educated. She had to do something that would shock the world, something that would make her unforgettable. The pressure to succeed, to maintain an ever-growing presence online, was overwhelming. Emily felt as though she was running out of time to achieve what she had always dreamed of. She needed a breakthrough, something that would change everything. And as she sat in front of her computer late into the night staring at her YouTube channel, her mind raced with plans and ideas, each more extreme than the last. She was no longer content with being just another YouTuber. She was determined to be the one everyone was talking about. The question that once seemed simple, what kind of content would resonate with viewers, now seemed irrelevant. All that mattered was how far she was willing to go to make her mark. Her desire for fame and recognition had reached a dangerous tipping point. As she prepared to take her next step, Emily was blinded by the possibility of becoming an online sensation, the most talked about creator on the internet. The dark thoughts that had taken root in her mind pushed her further down a path of no return. She knew what she had to do to achieve the fame she so desperately wanted, and the consequences of her actions seemed to fade into the background. The idea of becoming an internet legend consumed her, overshadowing everything else. In her quest for fame, Emily was willing to risk it all. Emily's plan was disturbingly simple, yet terrifyingly calculated. For weeks, she had been obsessed with an idea, a horrifying concept that would propel her into the fame she so desperately craved. She had decided to kill her entire family and broadcast the act live on her YouTube channel. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was something that had been brewing in her mind for days, then weeks. The idea of gaining millions of views, becoming the most talked about name on social media, was irresistible. She had watched others rise to fame through shocking acts, stunts, and pranks, and now she was determined to surpass them all. The tragedy of her actions, the sheer horror of the event, would be her ticket to internet stardom. It would be her moment to shine, to be the center of attention, and to make sure everyone would know her name. Emily had grown consumed by the desire for fame, to a point where she could no longer see beyond her goal. It wasn't about her family or the people she once loved. It wasn't even about the pain she would cause them. It was about the thrill of seeing her name trending, of knowing that her actions would be watched by millions all around the world. The thought of becoming the next viral sensation, the most infamous YouTuber to ever exist, consumed her every waking moment. She had begun to believe that nothing else mattered except the recognition she craved. The pressure to succeed, to be the one who stood out among the sea of creators, was driving her to the point of madness. Emily had begun to see her family not as people she loved, but as mere obstacles to her success. They were part of the narrative she needed to build to achieve her fame. She carefully began to plot the details of her plan, keeping everything hidden from her parents. Emily knew they wouldn't approve of what she was planning. They had always tried to keep her grounded, always encouraged her to pursue her YouTube channel in a healthy, positive way. They didn't know the depths of her obsession or how far she was willing to go to achieve the kind of recognition she sought. She had always presented herself as the innocent, ambitious girl chasing after a dream. But now, her ambitions had taken a much darker turn. Emily had started recording videos in secret. She was meticulous in her planning, ensuring that nothing would go wrong. She set up cameras in different parts of the house, positioning them strategically to capture every moment of the act. She knew her family's routines by heart: when her parents were home, when they would be asleep, when her younger brother would be playing video games in his room. She studied every detail of their daily lives, watching for the right moment to strike. She knew that the shock value would be greater if it happened when no one was expecting it, when her family felt safe and unaware of the danger lurking around them. They trusted her. They believed she was just a normal girl with dreams of being an influencer. They had no idea that beneath the surface, Emily's obsession with fame had taken a dark and twisted turn. Emily kept the cameras rolling, her mind consumed with the plans she had set in motion. The footage was already being prepared, and she thought carefully about how to make it as dramatic as possible. She couldn't afford any mistakes. The live stream had to be perfect, the timing crucial. Her thoughts raced as she visualized the entire scene in her mind. Her parents and brother would be caught off guard, their reactions raw and unfiltered. This would be the viral video that would take her to the top, the one that would make her an internet legend. There was no turning back now. Everything she had planned was set in motion. She continued to set the stage, testing the cameras, making sure everything was in place. Emily even rehearsed what she would say, trying to come up with a captivating narrative that would pull viewers in. She imagined the shock, the horror, the disbelief of the people watching from across the world. She imagined the comments flooding in, the likes, the shares, the media coverage. In her mind, it would be the ultimate viral moment, a spectacle that no one would be able to look away from. Emily had already visualized her success, and she knew it was only a matter of time before everything fell into place. Her parents, Rachel and David Thompson, had no idea what their daughter was planning. They trusted her completely, believing that Emily's desire to succeed on YouTube was just a normal part of growing up in the digital age. They were supportive of her efforts, even when they didn't fully understand the impact social media could have on young minds. They encouraged her to be creative, to express herself, but they didn't realize how much their support had allowed Emily's obsession to grow unchecked. They had no idea that their daughter, whom they had raised with love and care, was slowly becoming someone else, someone they could no longer recognize. The reality of Emily's twisted ambition was far beyond anything they could have imagined. As Emily's obsession grew, so did her ability to hide it from her parents. She would smile, laugh, and talk about her plans for her YouTube channel, but underneath the surface, she had already made up her mind. The need for validation, for recognition, had become all-consuming. Emily began to believe that she was not just creating content, but shaping a legacy. Her life, her family, everything she had known had become secondary to her pursuit of fame. She was willing to sacrifice it all for the rush of going viral, for the feeling of being admired by thousands, if not millions of strangers. Her parents were oblivious to the darkness that had taken root in Emily's heart. To them, she was just their ambitious daughter, a young girl with dreams of making it big on YouTube. They couldn't fathom that she was willing to go so far, to destroy the very people who had supported her, just for the sake of a few moments of internet fame. They trusted her with everything. But Emily's obsession with social media success was now her greatest secret, a secret that would soon unravel in the most tragic way. The cameras were in place, the plan was set, and Emily was ready. Her actions, born out of a deep-seated need for validation, would soon send shockwaves through the online world. What started as a harmless hobby, a young girl's dream to make it as a YouTuber, had turned into something far darker. She was no longer just Emily Thompson, a girl chasing her dreams. She had become someone else, someone capable of the unthinkable. The night of the planned attack seemed to unfold just as Emily had envisioned it. Everything appeared normal, almost peaceful. Rachel and David Thompson were settled in the living room, watching television together, their minds far from any hint of the tragedy that was about to unfold. Emily, however, had been preparing for hours in the quiet of her bedroom. She had meticulously planned every detail of her horrific act, making sure everything was in place, ensuring that no part of her plan would go awry. She set up multiple cameras in different corners of the house, strategically placing them to capture every angle of the chaos she was about to create. The idea of documenting her actions, of sharing her crime with the world, filled her with a twisted sense of excitement. Her heart raced as she checked the cameras one last time, ensuring that every lens was focused on the right spot. She could almost feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins, her hands trembling with anticipation. In that moment, she felt powerful, in control of her own future. She was about to do something no one else had done before, and the thought of becoming an internet sensation consumed her. The idea of finally gaining the fame she had craved for so long, of being the center of attention, overwhelmed her every thought. By 10 p.m., when her parents had finally gone to bed, the moment had arrived. Emily, now fully prepared, decided it was time to put her plan into action. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional creak of the floorboards. She walked down the hallway slowly, her steps calculated, her pulse quickening with every footfall. The fear and guilt that had plagued her earlier were now buried beneath the overwhelming desire to be recognized. This was it. She could already picture the reactions she would receive once the video hit the internet. Millions of views, countless shares, and media attention from around the world. She couldn't wait to see her name in headlines, to be the face of viral content. As she approached her parents' bedroom, she felt a brief hesitation, a momentary flicker of doubt. Her hands shook slightly, and for the first time, the reality of what she was about to do began to sink in. She paused for a fraction of a second, but the weight of her desire for fame quickly drowned out any thoughts of hesitation. Emily had thought about this moment endlessly, each detail carefully crafted in her mind. She had rehearsed it in her head over and over again, and now that it was finally happening, there was no turning back. The craving for attention, for the recognition she felt she deserved, overwhelmed everything else. In that brief moment of doubt, she steadied herself. There was no room for second thoughts. She had come too far, and her mind was already consumed with what was to come next. With a swift, calculated motion, Emily grabbed the knife she had hidden in her bedroom drawer. The cold metal felt foreign in her hands, yet somehow it gave her a sense of power. She approached her parents' sleeping forms, their breathing slow and steady, unaware of the horror that was about to descend upon them. Without a second thought, Emily struck. The violence was quick and brutal, a single well-aimed blow that left her parents struggling in their final moments. As the knife made contact, Emily filmed it all, her camera capturing every movement, every gasp, every scream. The camera followed her parents' fight for life, their frantic attempts to defend themselves, but Emily's focus remained on the bigger picture. She was indifferent to their suffering, consumed by the anticipation of what would come next, the fame, the recognition, the viral video. The violence she had carried out was no longer a crime to her. It was a means to an end. Her parents' cries for help were drowned out by the noise of her own heartbeat, the adrenaline pumping in her veins as she filmed the horror. Emily's face remained expressionless, almost detached, as her mind focused solely on the end result. The screams from her parents were brief, quickly stifled by the finality of her actions, once she finished with them, leaving them lifeless on the floor. Emily didn't pause to reflect on what she had just done. Instead, she moved forward, her mind already anticipating the views, the likes, and the fame that would soon follow. But Emily wasn't finished yet. Her plan had never been just about her parents. She had thought long and hard about how to make the video even more shocking, more sensational. The final part of her twisted plan involved her younger brother, Dylan. He was only 8 years old, completely unaware of the dark turn Emily's life had taken. He had been sleeping soundly in his room, oblivious to the nightmare that was unfolding just down the hall. Emily crept into his room, her footsteps quiet, the excitement building in her chest. Dylan's innocent face, untouched by the horrors of the world, filled her with a sense of power. He was the last piece of her plan, the final element needed to complete the spectacle. Emily stood over her brother's bed, her breath shallow as her heart raced faster. She had already convinced herself that this was the only way to achieve the recognition she so desperately wanted. Dylan had to be part of the spectacle. Without him, the video wouldn't have the same impact. The thought of being the mastermind behind such a shocking event, a global sensation, consumed her. She raised the knife once more, her hands steady, and with a swift motion, she struck. It was quick, efficient, and final. Dylan, still asleep, never had a chance. His life was taken just like that, with no warning, no chance to fight back. Emily stood over him, the final piece of her plan now completed. The excitement she had felt earlier now mixed with a dark satisfaction. She had done it. The crime she had staged was now complete. Her mind was numb, the adrenaline still coursing through her, but now, as she looked at the bodies of her family members lying motionless on the floor, a strange calm washed over her. She had achieved her goal. The ultimate viral content. The world would know her name. As she stood there in the silence that followed, she felt a twisted sense of triumph. She had crossed the line, taken everything from her family, and in return, she would get the fame she had craved. But in that moment, as the reality of what she had just done slowly began to set in, Emily was already thinking about what came next. The video, the views, the internet fame. It was all she had ever wanted, and now she had it. After the brutal killings, Emily stood still in the dimly lit room, the weight of what she had just done beginning to settle in. Though her face remained eerily calm, the bodies of her parents and brother lay lifeless on the floor, a chilling silence filling the house. But instead of feeling remorse, Emily felt an overwhelming surge of excitement. This was her moment. This was her chance to finally break free from the ordinary and become something bigger, something unforgettable. She had planned everything so meticulously, from the setup of the cameras to the timing of her actions, and now it was time to reap the rewards. With steady hands, Emily reached for her phone, her fingers almost mechanically tapping the screen as she began to set up the live stream. The room, which had been filled with the sounds of violence only moments earlier, now felt like a stage, and she was the star. As the stream began, Emily's heart raced with adrenaline, but her expression remained calm, unnervingly so. The camera light blinked on, and she stared directly into it, her eyes cold and unwavering. She had done it. She had created the ultimate viral sensation. "This is what happens when you push me too far," she said in a flat, emotionless tone. Her voice was steady, detached, as though she were reading from a script, as if the gravity of the situation hadn't fully hit her yet. "This is my moment. This is how you get to the top." As Emily spoke those chilling words, the live stream exploded with notifications. The screen was flooded with comments, reactions, and emojis as viewers from all over the world began to pour into the broadcast. At first, the numbers were small, just a few dozen people trickling in. But as the reality of what they were witnessing began to sink in, the viewership surged. People's shocked and horrified reactions flooded the comments section. "Is this real? What is going on? This can't be happening." Some viewers laughed, others expressed their disbelief with a mix of fear and fascination. Emily's eyes scanned the screen, watching the reactions pour in, her satisfaction growing as the numbers climbed higher. This was it. She had finally done it. Her name was about to be on everyone's lip. The live stream continued, the comments rolling in faster than Emily could read. It was a grotesque spectacle, one that kept viewers riveted, unable to look away. The sheer absurdity of what they were witnessing kept them glued to their screens. They were watching, many in complete disbelief, as a young girl presented the aftermath of a horrific crime with chilling calmness. Emily's face remained impassive, almost too calm for someone who had just taken the lives of her own family. She didn't show an ounce of remorse or fear. In that moment, all that mattered to her was the attention she was receiving, the likes, the shares, the growing recognition. The stream was being watched by people from all corners of the globe, and some viewers began to share it with friends, social media platforms, and even local news outlets. It wasn't long before the stream started to go viral in the worst possible way. People were horrified, but they couldn't look away. The online world had never seen anything like this before. Emily had turned a shocking crime into an internet phenomenon, a spectacle that would burn into the minds of those who witnessed it. But as the shock and fascination continued to spread, the gravity of the situation began to set in for those around her. Neighbors who had been unaware of the horror taking place just down the street began to notice the unusual activity on their screens. Some were horrified and immediately called the authorities, while others sat frozen in disbelief, unsure of what they were seeing. Friends of the family who had known Emily and her parents for years were among the first to recognize what was happening. The realization that the young girl they had once seen as innocent was behind such a heinous crime sent shockwaves through the local community. As the stream continued, more and more people began to realize the enormity of what Emily had done, and panic started to spread. The police were contacted shortly after, as the stream spread like wildfire across the internet. The authorities, alerted by concerned neighbors and friends who had seen the broadcast, rushed to the Thompson family home. What they encountered was more than just a crime scene. It was the embodiment of a deep, disturbing trend in modern society. They broke down the door and entered the house to find a gruesome scene. The bodies of Rachel, David, and Dylan Thompson lying in pools of blood on the floor. The sight was horrifying, but it was also a stark reflection of the dark side of social media, the dangerous lengths some people would go to in order to gain fame and recognition. The police immediately began to secure the scene, calling for backup and attempting to process the crime scene as quickly as possible. But even as they worked, they couldn't ignore the fact that this was more than just a murder. It was a chilling reminder of how the pursuit of fame and attention could warp someone's mind, especially a young person who had become consumed by the addictive nature of social media. Emily's actions were not only senseless and violent, but also reflective of the growing influence that the digital world had on young, impressionable minds. The police knew that this wasn't just another tragic family crime, it was something much darker, a reflection of the dangers posed by the need for validation in the age of social media. As authorities combed through the evidence, they discovered the full extent of Emily's planning. The cameras set up around the house had captured everything, from her initial actions to the chilling moments when she presented her crime to the world through the live stream. It was clear that Emily had carefully crafted every step of her plan, taking great pains to ensure that her crime would be witnessed by as many people as possible. In her mind, this wasn't a senseless murder, it was a carefully executed performance, one designed to propel her into the spotlight and cement her place in the annals of internet infamy. The investigation that followed was swift, but the ramifications of Emily's actions would be felt far beyond the small Ohio community where the crime took place. The story of a 12-year-old girl who had killed her family in cold blood for the sake of online fame made headlines around the world. It raised important questions about the impact of social media on young people and the potential dangers of the constant search for validation online. Emily had crossed a line that no one could have ever anticipated, and in the process, she had shattered her family, her community, and any sense of innocence she once had. As the story unfolded, the internet exploded with discussions about the dangers of social media, the dark side of fame, and the responsibility that platforms and creators had in shaping the minds of their audiences. Emily's name, once just another face in the sea of YouTube personalities, had become synonymous with tragedy and terror. The horror of what she had done and how she had used her crime as a means to gain the attention she so desperately craved left an indelible mark on the world. It was a tragic reminder of how far someone could be pushed by the intoxicating desire for online fame, and how the pursuit of recognition could lead to the darkest of consequences. Emily was arrested soon after the police arrived at the scene, and the world was left in utter disbelief. The events that had unfolded in the quiet suburban home in Ohio were beyond comprehension. The fact that a 12-year-old girl had been responsible for the brutal murders of her own family was something that no one could have anticipated. The local community, where Emily had once been seen as just another young, hopeful, aspiring YouTuber, was now devastated by the horror that had unfolded. Neighbors and friends who had known Emily and her family for years were shaken to their core. The entire town felt the sting of the tragedy, as if something sacred had been violated. How could this happen? How could such a young girl, a child who seemed so full of promise, commit such an incomprehensible act of violence? The arrest sent shockwaves through the media. News outlets picked up the story quickly, and soon it became national and then international news. People couldn't stop talking about it, trying to piece together the motivations behind the crime. Experts weighed in on the dangers of social media, offering their opinions on the impact of the digital age on young minds. It didn't take long for the conversation to shift toward the darker side of the internet and the increasing pressure young people face to gain followers, likes, and recognition online. Emily's actions were not just a tragic loss for her family. They had become a disturbing symbol of the dangers of social media culture, a reflection of the way that constant online exposure and the quest for fame could warp a person's sense of reality. What had started as a seemingly innocent pursuit of attention and validation online had spiraled into something much darker. Emily had never set out to cause harm, but her increasing obsession with her YouTube channel had slowly pushed her to the edge. She had wanted to stand out, to make a name for herself, and the more she became engrossed in the world of likes, followers, and viral content, the more desperate she became to keep up with the ever-growing demands of the internet. At first, it had been about fun, creating videos, sharing her thoughts, and engaging with her growing audience. But over time, the pressure mounted. The idea of gaining millions of views, of becoming a household name in the online world, consumed her every thought. The tragic reality of Emily's actions was that, in her mind, they were a means to an end. She had convinced herself that achieving fame, gaining notoriety, and making her name synonymous with viral content were the ultimate goals in life. In her world, where every like and share validated her existence, the idea of doing something shocking to get attention seemed like the only way to truly succeed. The thirst for fame became all-consuming, and her actions escalated as she searched for ways to make her content more extreme, more sensational. The idea of live streaming an event, of orchestrating something that would leave the world stunned, was the ultimate plan, one she believed would propel her to the top. But what no one could have foreseen was the devastating consequence of Emily's obsession with fame. The desire to be seen and to be recognized had driven her to a point where she could no longer distinguish right from wrong. She no longer cared about the impact of her actions. In her mind, the ends justified the means. The line between reality and her online persona had blurred to the point where she saw no distinction between the two. Emily had become consumed by her image, by the way the world would see her, and ultimately it cost her everything. The haunting question that remained after the horrific crime was revealed was simple but chilling. How far can the pursuit of online fame truly push someone? Emily's story became a tragic example of just how dangerous the pressure to achieve visibility and success on social media can be. The world was left to wonder how a young girl so full of potential could fall victim to such a twisted obsession. Her actions, fueled by a need for recognition and validation, ultimately led to the destruction of her own family and the loss of her future. In the aftermath of the crime, Emily's story became a cautionary tale. A stark reminder of the dark side of the digital age. Social media, once a tool for connection and creativity, had turned into a battleground for young minds seeking validation at any cost. Emily's actions were not just the result of a troubled child. They were a tragic reflection of how the need for fame and recognition could distort a person's values, driving them to commit unspeakable acts. In a world where online fame could be the ultimate goal, the consequences of such an obsession were now painfully clear. The pursuit of visibility had turned deadly, and no one could have predicted the depth of the consequences it would have.